The self you can't find. What the Buddha wanted you to see. There is someone you've lived with since the day you were born. You've never been apart from this person, not for a single second. You protect them, worry about them, sacrifice for them. Sometimes you even hate them. This person is me. But here's a strange question. Have you ever actually met them? Your name, that's something others gave you. Your face, it changes with time. Your job, your role, your memories, all of those can shift or disappear, and still, something inside you whispers, I'm still me. So what is that thing? Where is it? Human beings have asked this for as long as we've been able to think. Descartes concluded, I think, therefore I am, as if the act of thinking proved there was someone doing it. Hume looked inward and found nothing but a stream of impressions with no one watching. Sartre declared that I is whatever I choose to be. Every era, every philosopher, a different answer. And that disagreement, stretching across centuries, is already telling us something. If the self were simply there, the way your heart is there, why can't the brightest minds in history agree on what it is? 25 centuries ago, someone sat with this same question under a tree in northern India. He watched his own mind and discovered something that none of the philosophers before or after him quite arrived at. He didn't offer a new answer. He discovered that the way we ask the question already contains the trap. In the Mollyaphaguna Sutta, a monk asked the Buddha, who feels, who craves? The Buddha said, that question is wrongly put. The right question is not who feels. It's what conditions give rise to feeling. That single correction, shifting from who to what conditions, may sound small. But everything the Buddha taught about the self follows from it. Before you listen to anyone talk about the self, including the Buddha, you have every right to say, prove it. Don't ask me to believe. Show me why. The Buddha respected that. He said, 𝐿, come and see for yourself. So let's take that invitation seriously and go looking for the self together. First, we need to agree on what we're looking for. If you say, I have a self, that self must meet certain conditions. These aren't Buddhist conditions. They're the minimum requirements for any concept of selfhood in any tradition, any century. The first is ownership. If something is truly mine, I should have authority over it. If this body is mine, I should be able to tell it. Don't get sick. Don't age. If these emotions are mine, I should be able to decide, I'm done being sad. You can influence your body and emotions, but influence is not ownership. A tenant can rearrange the furniture, but that doesn't make them the landlord. The second is consistency. The me at 5, at 25, and at 60 must be the same. But you at 15 loved things that you at 35 are embarrassed by. Which one is the real you? A self that is always changing is just another way of saying, there is no fixed self. There is only change. The third is unity. The self must be one thing, not a collection of parts. If it's a collection, then I is just a label. The way fist is not a new object when you close your hand. It's still 5 fingers in a particular arrangement. Now, with these conditions in mind, let's look at the 5 aggregates, the 5 components of experience the Buddha examined. The body. You can't control whether it gets sick or stays healthy. Every few years, nearly every cell is replaced. The body you have now is materially different from the one you had a decade ago. And if you want this body to be stronger, healthier, more flexible, you cannot simply command it. You have to eat differently, sleep differently, move differently. You have to change the conditions. The body responds to conditions, not to your authority. And something that only responds to conditions, that you must negotiate with rather than command. In what sense is it you? Feelings. The raw feeling tone that colors every moment. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The same song makes you cry today, leaves you indifferent next year, and 10 years from now, you won't even remember it. Which reaction is the real you? If feeling tone is you, then you change with every breath. And something that changes with every breath, how is that different from no fixed self at all? Perception. The mind's ability to recognize and label. The same face looks radiant when you're in love and ordinary when you're not. Perception doesn't report reality. It interprets reality through the filter of your current state. And that filter keeps changing. Mental formations, will, habits, character traits, the patterns that feel most intimately yours. Many people point here. This is the real me, the one who chooses, the one who decides. But did you choose your values? Did you select your fears? Did you design how you react under stress? Your temperament was shaped by genes, family, culture, pain, forces far older than your conscious memory. If you can't command your own will, can't simply decide to stop wanting what you want, in what sense do you own it? Consciousness, the knowing. But consciousness never appears alone. Seeing consciousness needs something to see. Hearing consciousness needs something to hear. Remove the object, and consciousness vanishes with it. A self that cannot exist on its own. Can that really be called a self? 5 places searched. None satisfies even one condition, let alone all 3. Perhaps the self is the combination of all 5. But then I is a label for a temporary arrangement. The way river is a word for countless water drops moving in the same direction. The river was never a thing. It was a description of a process. In the Foam Sutta, the Buddha offered images that stay with me. Form is like a lump of foam on the river. Looks solid, but press it, and there's nothing inside. Feeling is like a water bubble. Appears and pops in the same breath. Perception is like a shimmering mirage at noon. Mental formations are like a banana trunk. Peel away every layer, and you never find a core. Consciousness is like an illusion. Vivid, convincing, entirely produced by conditions you don't see. Then he asked, in all of this, where is the substance? That question was not meant to crush you. The Buddha was a physician, and this examination was a diagnosis. A doctor examines so that treatment can begin. The 5 aggregate examination is not the conclusion. It's the starting point for what the Buddha actually wanted you to see. So if there's no self at the center of your experience, what is actually going on? The Buddha never said nothing is happening. Experience is present. Thinking is present. What he said is that all of it is happening without a someone behind it. There is a process, vast, intricate, self-sustaining, and it doesn't need an owner to run. Does a river need a someone to flow? Conditions meet, and the process unfolds. He described this in what's known as dependent origination, a chain of 12 conditions, each giving rise to the next. Rather than listing them, let me show you how it works in a moment you already know. You're scrolling through your phone. A message appears. Someone said something that stings. Watch what happens next. Light hits your eyes. That's contact. A feeling tone arises. Unpleasant. You didn't choose it. It showed up the way heat shows up when you touch a flame. Then the mind moves. It wants the unpleasant thing to go away. That's craving. And right behind craving, a story begins. They disrespected me. The story thickens, and a character appears at its center. Me, the one who was wronged. You didn't decide to create that character. One condition led to another, and suddenly there's a whole weather system with a name. Each link in the chain doesn't need a who. It only needs the link before it. Ignorance, the not seeing clearly, is a condition, the way darkness is the absence of light. From not seeing clearly, habitual reactions arise. From reactions, awareness oriented toward objects arises. And the chain continues, building itself. In the sheaves of reeds Sutta, the elder Sariputta, one of the Buddha's foremost disciples, offered an image to explain this mutual dependence. Consciousness and name and form, he said, are like two sheaves of reeds leaning against each other. Neither stands on its own. Pull one away, and the other falls. The sense of someone in here lives at the point where they meet, an impression born from mutual support, belonging to neither side. Think of watching a film. You see someone running across a field, but slow it down, and there's no movement at all. Only still photographs displayed so quickly that your eyes create the impression of motion. Each moment of experience is a still frame, a flash of contact, feeling, reaction. And because they pass so rapidly, the mind stitches them into something that feels continuous. That continuity feels like me, but frame by frame, there is no one in the frames. There is only the flickering. The self is not something you either have or don't have. It's something being constructed, in every moment, by the process of reacting, clinging, and telling stories. You don't have a self. You are weaving one, constantly, without realizing it. And the question that follows naturally, if I've been weaving this my whole life without knowing, what happens when I finally see the threads? Forget the philosophy for a moment. Think about the last time you were truly hurt. Maybe someone said something about you that wasn't true, or worse, something that was. Maybe you lay awake at night with a nameless ache in your chest, the feeling that you're falling behind in a race you never agreed to run. That pain was real. The Buddha called suffering the first truth, not because he was pessimistic, but because he respected your experience enough to start there. But look at where that pain was located. When someone said something that stung, was the pain in the words? Words are vibrations in the air. Was it in your ears? Your ears just received sound. Somewhere between the sound waves and your sleepless night, a transformation happened. It was the collision between what was said and the image you carry of who you are. You feel hurt when reality contradicts your self-narrative. And look at how much of your life is organized around defending that narrative. The energy spent performing a version of yourself, the anxiety over how you're perceived, the way a single criticism from a stranger can ruin your day. All of it flows from one place, the belief that there is a fixed me that must be kept intact. The Buddha saw that when you weave a self, you simultaneously create a defense system. Anger arises to fight threats. Craving arises to strengthen the self. Delusion arises to hide its fragility. The three poisons are not personal failures. They are structural consequences. Build a sandcastle at the ocean's edge and you'll spend all your time fighting waves. The waves aren't the problem. The location is. There is a deeper layer, the pain of holding. You love someone and say, "This person is mine." When they change or leave, you feel robbed. But look carefully. You didn't lose them. You lost the belief that they belong to you. They were always their own being, moving through their own conditions. The idea that they were yours was a thread you wove into your own web. When reality pulled that thread, the web trembled, and you called that trembling heartbreak. The 𝐂𝐴𝐚𝐧𝐬𝐞 Sutta captures this. A person who sees clearly how things arise and pass away doesn't cling to "it exists" or "it doesn't exist." When you see that you never truly possessed anything, the fear of loss dissolves. What felt like loss was the end of a misunderstanding. And the end of a misunderstanding, however painful, is a kind of freedom. And deeper still, the quietest layer, the pain of endlessly becoming. Every morning a self assembles. Today, you are the responsible parent. Tomorrow, the ambitious professional. When one crumbles, when you're no longer the one who's loved, something inside you panics. Because a story is ending, and you've mistaken the story for yourself. In dependent origination, this is the link called becoming, bhava. From clinging, becoming arises. Each time you grasp a narrative about who you are, you give birth to a version of yourself that immediately begins to age. Conditions change. The identity cracks. You cling to the next story. Think of how many selves you've already buried. The child who believed in magic. The teenager who knew everything. Each one felt permanent while it lasted. Each one dissolved when conditions shifted. Each dissolution carried grief because you mistook the costume for the person wearing it. If you're hurting right now, if you carry that ache of not being enough, the pain is real. The Buddha never denied anyone's pain, but the me that you believe is trapped inside that pain is not as solid as it feels. It's a story being told, and when you begin to see that clearly, the story naturally loosens its grip. But here's where something tricky happens. When you hear that the story can loosen, the mind immediately wants to grab that as a technique. I should let go. I should practice non-self. And that impulse, as reasonable as it sounds, is the subtlest trap of all. I want to let go of the self. Listen to that sentence one more time. I want to let go of the self. The one who wants to let go is the self, wearing spiritual clothing, subtler and harder to spot, but still weaving. In the Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha described certain questions as unwise attention, ayoniso manasikara. What am I? What was I? What will I become? He said that when the mind chases these, 6 kinds of wrong view arise, including I have a self, I have no self, and even through myself, I perceive myself. Even the conclusion, there is no self, becomes a wrong view if you hold it as something I has figured out. The mind takes the teaching and wraps it around itself like new skin. So if searching is a trap, and denying is a trap, and understanding can become a trap, where is the exit? It's in the shift we touched on at the beginning. What the Buddha told Mollapaguna. He changed the question entirely. Don't ask who. Ask what conditions. The shift is from searching for a thing to observing a process. One direction adds thread to the weaving. The other watches the weaving happen. Here is what that looks like in lived experience. The next time anger flares in you, notice the difference between asking, "Why am I angry?" and asking, "What conditions just gave rise to this anger?" The first question pulls you into the story. The second opens a small gap. You start noticing. There was a sound, a memory, a tension in the body. None of those things is you. They are conditions, arising and passing. And in that noticing, something loosens. But why is that shift so difficult? Because underneath every individual story, there is a deeper structure holding them all in place. The Buddhist tradition calls it Sakkaya Ditthi, wrong view of self, and it stands first among the 10 fetters for a reason. It's the conviction that somewhere within your experience, there is a me. Before society tells you you must be successful, you already believe there is a you who could succeed or fail. Before culture shapes your worldview, there is already an I waiting to claim it as its own. Wrong view of self is the root, and you don't need to trim branches one by one. See the root clearly, and the branches dry on their own. The knowledge you've gathered, the values you hold, the skills you've built, none of that is the problem. The Buddha himself used language, logic, and cultural knowledge to teach for 45 years. Knowledge becomes a source of suffering only when you fuse it with identity. When "I know this" hardens into "this is who I am." The issue was never the knowledge. It was the grip. The Upanisa Sutta describes a chain running in the opposite direction from suffering. Where dependent origination shows how ignorance leads to suffering, this reverse chain shows how suffering, when clearly met, leads to freedom. The chain is long, and each step nurtures the next. Suffering gives rise to faith, not blind belief, but confidence born from honest observation. Faith gives rise to joy. Joy deepens into rapture. Rapture settles into tranquility. Tranquility opens into a deep bliss, and that bliss becomes the foundation for immersion. From immersion, the mind sees things as they truly are. That seeing gives rise to disillusionment, not despair, but the quiet turning away from what you now recognize cannot satisfy. From disillusionment comes dispassion, and from dispassion, release. The starting point is suffering. Your suffering, the one you carry right now, when you stop running from it and turn toward it with steady attention, becomes the very condition for awakening. Ignorance creates suffering going forward. Suffering, clearly seen, dissolves ignorance going backward. The key was always in the lock. You were just looking for it somewhere else. And the wisdom that arises here, panya, is not knowledge in the way we usually mean it. It is the direct seeing that happens when the mind is still enough and honest enough to observe its own machinery without flinching. The moment you see, really see, that what you called I is being assembled right now, by conditions, out of contact and craving and habit, and that no part of that assembly is you. Something shifts that cannot be undone. It's the difference between reading about fire and holding your hand near the flame. One is information. The other rearranges you from the inside. There's a moment in the scriptures that has stayed with me for decades. A moment of silence that says more than words ever could. The wanderer Vacchagotta came to the Buddha and asked directly, "Is there a self?" The Buddha was silent. "Is there no self?" Still silent. After a long pause, Vacchagotta stood up and walked away. Ananda, sitting nearby, asked why. The Buddha said, "If I had told him there is a self, I would have reinforced the view that keeps beings trapped. If I had told him there is no self, he, already confused, already in pain, would have thought the self he once had was now destroyed. He would have fallen from one kind of suffering into another." Both answers would have given Vacchagotta something to hold on to. And holding on is the very mechanism of suffering. The silence was the answer. Throughout this journey, we searched for the self and didn't find it. We watched how the mind weaves one, moment by moment, through conditions. We felt how that weaving creates pain. The pain of defending, of holding, of endlessly becoming. We saw how even the desire to be free can become another thread. I think this leaves you here, with your hand closed. You've been holding your fist shut your whole life. Inside it, you believe, is everything that matters. Your identity, your worth, your place in the world. And the thought of opening your hand terrifies you, because you believe that emptiness means having nothing. But what if you opened it? Because you've done the work. You've examined every place the self could be, and you've seen with your own eyes that it's not there, because it was never there in the way you imagined. And so slowly, you let your fingers unfold. The palm is empty. You never held anything. You never lost anything. And the emptiness doesn't feel like loss. It feels like setting down a bag you'd been carrying so long you forgot it was heavy. The weight was so familiar, you thought it was part of your body. What remains? Life remains. The sound of rain on a window. The warmth of a hand in yours. The ache of compassion when you see someone struggle. All of it's still here. More vivid, in fact, because it's no longer filtered through the question, what does this mean for me? When there's no me to defend, experience doesn't diminish. It opens up. The Buddha told you one thing: look closely. And when you look closely enough, you see there was never anything to find, never anything to let go of, just a river flowing. And you, finally, no longer trying to hold water in your fist. In that openness, in that unclenching, something ancient and quiet settles into place. It was always there, underneath the noise, underneath the stories, underneath the grasping, waiting for you to stop and look. That is what the Buddha sat with under that tree 25 centuries ago. A seeing. And that seeing, clear, direct, patient, is the door.